All right, so what week are we in? Can somebody tell me what week we're in here in Blackboard? We are in week 8. Week 8 is going to show up here in a moment. I didn't open it early for a number of reasons, but let's get it open here for you. It's visible to you now. You have some handouts that we're going to go over today, sample source paragraph that we're going to go over today, an instructional video on using sources, which covers a lot of what we're covering today, a quiz on source use that covers that video on using sources, a discussion board, and I'll put due dates on these before I log out for the day, and a source paragraph. So I'm not going to record everything we do today. I'm only going to record the parts of class that are not covered in this instructional video on using sources. So if you're watching this later and it pauses while we cover that, just go to that video and make sure that you go over that. And then I am going to cover it while we talk about the assignment and the discussion board. But before we do that, we're going to go over the concept of using sources today. Before we go over those things, does anybody have questions about what was due last week? What we're going to do is we're actually going to go into this sample source paragraph, and we're going to take a look at how we build a source paragraph. Once we have our sources, what do we do with them? So you've already started doing some work for this in the discussion board assignment where I asked you to choose 3 quotes from the article you agreed with and explain why you chose those quotes. That's really the first step in building a source paragraph, and you've done it already, so that's good news. But I want us to take a look at this sample paragraph here. And without even going over what's above it yet, I want us to take a look at some things that we can get about this paragraph without even reading it yet. Okay, first answer me this, without even reading, is this a long paragraph or a short paragraph? It's a long paragraph. If this were double spaced, it would go on to the next page by a good bit, right? It's a significantly long paragraph. Is it more or less than 10 sentences? By a lot, right? If the quotes are in green, how many quotes are there? Make it a little bigger for you. There are 2. I've also put in a paraphrase. Can anybody tell me what a paraphrase is? I love that, Jayla. Yes, ma'am. It's when you take something from what you've read and put it in your own words. And we do this sometimes with a fact where we learned the fact, but we don't need their words to explain the fact, but we learned the fact from the article, so we're telling it as coming from the article. We do it when we learn a statistic from an article, like a number, like this many number of Americans has had COVID or something like that. When we have a fact or a statistic like that, that's paraphrasing. We might put it in our own words, but we didn't make it up out of our own heads. So we have to put a citation for it. So we treat it almost like a quote. We don't put it inside quotation marks, but we do give it an introductory phrase and a citation. So I've shown you that here as well, okay? You guys are going to be choosing, the first thing you're going to be working on is a source paragraph from one of the articles that I've already given you, not one of the new ones that you're finding. We're still evaluating those, making sure we understand them and making sure they're good to use. And we'll continue to do that in discussion board. But today you're going to take what you've already done and build it into a whole source paragraph. So you've started it, you've chosen 3 quotes and explained why you chose them. That's a great start. That gives you 3 greens here instead of 2 greens and an orange, which is perfect. 3 quotes is just right, okay? I did 2 quotes and a paraphrase just to show you what a paraphrase looks like. You can try a paraphrase if you'd like, but you can also just go with 3 quotes and that would be okay. All right, no less than 2 quotes though. Okay, how many sentences are there before I ever get to a quote? There are 5 sentences before I even get to a quotation. So that tells you something about how slow and careful and patient we have to be with source use. Okay, what happens after I quote? Each time there's something in purple after each one. What is it? Analysis, and we're going to learn what analysis is. It's a little bit like the I agree with this because, although we're trying to get rid of that same language every time, we don't want to say I agree with this because every time. But that's the flavor of it, right? That's the feeling of what comes after a quote. So we're going to go through this paragraph one section at a time and learn about it. So I'm going to scroll up and we're going to see that this is a beginner's guide to building a source paragraph. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps in building a source paragraph. And I want you to use this list and this step-by-step instruction and this sample paragraph, which is color-coded, to use as a model. Okay, and right now what we're going to do is we're going to go over this model. So what's the first job in building a paragraph that has a source in it? Do you just start in by telling about the author and the name of the source? Or do you do something else first? What's step 1? Yeah, that's about the idea of your thesis, right? So let's see what that looks like in action. Let's scroll back down and see what that looks like in action. A topic sentence about the ideas of the paper would sound like this. It's here in black. Sometimes the death of a parent exposes to a son or daughter how little they really knew about the previous generation. So everything I put in this paragraph is going to try to prove that sometimes when a parent dies, you realize you didn't know them very well. Okay. With yours, it's going to be something about Confederate monuments. You're going to have a statement that says, it was a horrible day when the monuments came down in Charlottesville, or it was a great day when the monuments came down in Charlottesville, depending on which side you've taken. That topic sentence has to be still doing its jobs of telling exactly what the paragraph will be about, giving a transitional phrase, and connecting to your thesis overall. Okay, so don't forget that topic sentence. Somebody read our second job, step number 2. Mitzi, can you read step 2 for us? Mitzi, are you able to hear me? You're still muted, love. Oh, you can't unmute today? I'm going to pick on somebody else so you don't have to panic. Hold on one second. Jayla, my friend, can you read step 2 for us while Mitzi's figuring that out? Great. Can you use the example? Great. Now let's take a look at that in action here. You can see that this paragraph has 4 sentences introducing the author, the title, and a little bit of summary of the source. Okay, so author, title, summary. Kimberly, what's a summary? What does that mean, summing it up? Okay, it's definitely in your own words, and it is taking what you've read and saying a very short version of it, right? So I like to think of a summary as what you can remember about the article without looking at it. You read the article and you put it away, and somebody said, well, what was that article about? And a summary, you should be able to tell them what the article was about without opening it back up and looking at it again. Okay, so if I'm reading something on Facebook and my husband says, what's that? I should be able to summarize it for him without reading it to him, right? I should just say, oh, this is an article about the upcoming election, and it's talking about the effect of the debate on the polls. There. Right, that's all you have to say. You're just saying what it's about in your own words without having to look at it. It should be simple and clear and get it across to the other person whether they want to read it or not, right? Um, okay, so let's see if, Sanaya, can you read the example of that here in this paragraph that starts, it's the blue source introduction, starts with James Baldwin was? Very good. Okay, so let's break that down. In my first sentence, I tell about the author. I don't do anything else, just one whole sentence all by itself telling you about the author. In the second one, I have another whole sentence just giving you the title. Okay? Chantel, what can you tell me about what you notice about this title? Yes, ma'am. The title of an article or a short story or a poem is going to go in quotation marks. Very good. So this has been put in quotation marks. Anything else you notice about it, like the capitals? That's right. Each of the significant words in this title has its first letter capitalized. From and don't, because one's a preposition and one's an article. But this is what we call proper title format. So for an article title, we would put it in quotation marks and then capitalize it. Now, this isn't in here. What would you, but let's see if you can look at it from the sample above. What about the periodical, like the Washington Post or the Daily News or the New York Times? What would happen to the periodical title when you tried to format it? Can you tell me from looking at that example? Morgan, let me talk to Morgan for a minute. Are you with me, Morgan? All right. What is this periodical title? How has that been formatted? It's underlined. That's right. And it's got the same rules for capitals. The initial letter in each major word, including the first word, is capitalized. So articles go in quotation marks, periodical titles get underlined. Okay. So that down here, we have it capitalized and we have it in quotation marks. That tells us it's an article title. Excellent. And then we have two sentences of summary here. Okay, so two sentences of summary. So again, I took 4 sentences to slowly introduce that source, right? A lot of times students will make the mistake of trying to say James Baldwin in his essay Notes from a Native Son reflects that, comma, quote, it seems to me to, and they try to squish all of that information into one sentence. And number one, the grammar gets away from you in a hurry and it starts sounding super weird. And number two, you're giving your reader too much to think about at once. They're getting the author and the title and the quote all at the same time, and it's too much. It'd be like having a hamburger and trying to eat it all in one bite, just stuffing it all into your face, right? We don't want to do that. We want to take this one step at a time. So a sentence for the author, a sentence for the title, and 2 sentences of summary at least when you introduce a source. Then you can quote from it, okay? Who wants to read that quote to me? This part right here. How about Jakaya? Can you read that quote to me that's in green? Excellent. Now, what's this, Jakaya, that you just read? What's that? Do you know? What is this little phrase that's highlighted right here before the quote? What is that? Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And what we call it, I'm going to scroll up because I wanted to see if you could recognize it anyway. But let's go up to where I name it for you. Okay, there's a term for it. Okay, tell me what the term for it is. It's step 3. And quote integration, that's right. So you're using the quote as part of a complete sentence, and we call this little thing in front a quote integration phrase. He says is the easiest one, right? He says, comma, quote. But every quote that you use needs to be woven into a correct sentence with one of those introductory phrases, one of those quote integration phrases at the beginning. Now you can put it at the end. The average temperature of Pluto, blah, 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 said the author, right? But I'm going to give you a tip on this. A lot of your instructors that you're going to have in college are reading like 50, 60, 100 papers at a time, and they're looking to see if you have your quote integration, and they're going as fast as they can. And if you tuck it in at the end, they might not see it. Right? So you want it right up front in a college essay. Later, if you're writing professionally or for a journal or something, you can be a little more creative, but you don't want to have anything slip by an exhausted instructor, right? So you make sure you plop it right up at the front. I can't tell you how many times I had to go into a professor's office and say, my quote integrations are there, they're just at the end. You don't want to have a meeting to sort it out. Just put it. I learned pretty quick to put mine at the beginning when I was dealing with overworked teachers. So that's just advice. It's not incorrect to put it at the end, but it'll save you some trouble. I'll tell you that. So we want to have that quote integration phrase every single time. Okay, let me get back down there. And then what was at the end? I know you can't see it, but what's step 4? Amaya Collins, can you tell me what step 4 is? Amaya, are you able to hear me and unmute? All right, Mitzi, are you able to communicate yet? Yes, here you are. Can you tell me what step 4 is? Citation. I'm sorry. They're too tiny. Does that help a bit? Oh, interesting. Is that making it better then? Okay. Okay, don't fuss over it. Citation placement. Provide an in-text citation at the end of the sentence in which your quote appears. Citation format. says, since you will already have provided the author's name and the title in your sentences, you can just use the page numbers in parentheses. However, if you're quoting a short poem, use line numbers. Listen to me carefully. If you are quoting a source without the original pagination, use the paragraph number. How many of you, by a show of hands, realize that the sources that you get from the database do not have the original page numbers in them? Is everybody with me there? None of you have the original page numbers. You don't. If it came through the database, you don't have the original page numbers. So what are you going to use for a format for your citation? Paragraph number. So it's going to look like this right here. Okay, and it does down below. So how do you know the paragraph number that your quote came from? How do you know the paragraph number it came from? You count. Yes, that's right. Somebody's like, how do I know? It does, they're not labeled. It's like, no, you have to count with your brain. All right, so, but you are all capable of counting. I know you are. You got to college and you can count. So you can just got to take that time to count those paragraphs. So where does that citation go? Kimberly, where does that citation go? Where does the citation go? We're looking at a quote with a citation right here. Where does the citation go? Does it go at the beginning of the sentence, at the end of the sentence, at the end of the quote? Where does it go? It goes at the end of a sentence in which a quote appears. The end of a sentence. So if my sentence continued after I was done quoting, I would still put the citation at the end of the sentence, not at the end of the quote. Okay, here they happen to be both in the same place. Okay, all right. What happens in purple after my quotes? Like after every quote here, there's purple. Even after my paraphrase, there's purple. What's the purple? Yeah, what is an analysis? Let's look up above. Analysis needed is step 5. Explain how your quote proves your point. You must guide your reader to see what you see in every quote. So put that in your own words. What's an analysis? Yeah, that's right, Sarah. So it's why the quote proves your point, basically. It's the I agree because idea. We don't want to say I agree because every single time, but we want to make sure that we're explaining what we see in the quote and why it's important and how it connects to what we're trying to prove. Okay. Now, the mistake a lot of students will make on this one is that they'll just paraphrase the quote. They'll say, they'll have the quote, it seemed to me too that the violence which rose all about us as my father left the world had been devised as a corrective for the pride of his eldest son. And they'll say what this means is that after his father died, he realized that his father's anger was supposed to correct him in his own life. And y'all don't have to do that. I'm a really good reader. I can understand all of the quotes you throw at me, I promise. You don't need to tell me what they mean, okay? Please don't waste my reading time telling me what they mean. I know what they mean. I read it. I'm a good reader, right? What I need to know is why it's important. Why do I care about that quote, right? And that's what I'm explaining here is why we care about that. So I've said Baldwin, the eldest son, is learning in this moment that his father's behavior toward his family need not be his own. As he thinks about his father's hardness, he also thinks about the life he lived, right? So he's differentiating himself from his father and realizing he didn't know his father very well. And that's what we're getting at. And then we repeat that process. I have a paraphrase here. He says he does not know how old his father was, but he knows that his father's mother was born in slavery. Now, I didn't just know that off the top of my head. I got that from a specific spot in the essay, so I give that a citation as well. It also has a little introductory phrase here that he says is there again to indicate that that's not me making it up. It's not somebody else telling me about it. That's Baldwin telling me about it. Okay, so we have that and the citation if you're paraphrasing. Okay, and analysis after that, right? If you give me a statistic, I want to see a citation, and then I want to see your analysis. Why is that statistic important? Right? If you're telling me how many monuments have been removed, I need a citation for that number, and then I want you to tell me whether I'm supposed to be shocked by that number, and if I am, why, and if I'm not, why, right? So I need you to make sure you're analyzing it. We do another quote with another introductory phrase here, the he says. We have another citation at the end. So a lot of times students will make a mistake. They will put one citation at the end of the paragraph, but that's not what we're doing. We want a citation after each and everything that was used that came from that article. Okay, so each and everything gets its own citation here. Now, we're just talking about in-text citations. We're not talking about the works cited list at the end yet. We're not even going to deal with that this week. Right now, we're just working on letting me know where in the article this came from. Okay, and you are going to use the articles. I'm going to close this. You are going to use the articles that we got to when we started this unit back in week 6. So you're going to need to go back to those articles. You might even go back to the discussion of the opinions where I asked you to use the quotes and then state your opinions and that sort of thing in week 7. But let's make sure that we know the basics that we need to know to talk about this. Who is the author of this article from The Atlantic? Kevin Levin, right. And what's the article title? Yes, ma'am. And what would you put around that title to tell me that it's the title of the article? Yes, ma'am. And what's the title of the periodical this was published in? Yes, ma'am. And how would you format that to tell me that it's the title of the periodical? Yes, awesome. Okay, you guys are really picking this up quick. Okay, awesome. Then we have, I want to make sure you can answer the same questions about this one. Let's start with what periodical it comes from because that's right here in front of us. What periodical does this come from? The Federalist, excellent. What is the title of the article? Correct. And who's the author? Almost. What's his name? Right. Now, we may hate him a little bit for it, but if he uses all 3 names, we have to use all 3 names. Okay? And you can hate him while you do it. That's fine. But if somebody uses all 3 names, you use all 3 names the first time you mention them. After you've gone through all 3 of their names and you want to just say the author says or do you say John says or Davidson says? Why? Right, because we were not raised by wolves and we don't call people we don't know by their first names. We just don't do that. We don't do it in person and we don't do it in writing, right? You're not going to call somebody you're not friends with by their first name, right? I'm going to call my daughter's teacher Miss Josephine or whatever her name is. I'm not going to call her, hey, Jane, right? That's rude. And it's not because she outranks me. Generally speaking, I have a doctorate and they don't. So technically, I outrank them. It's just a sign of respect, right? To call somebody by their last name if you're not friends with them, right? So we do that here in writing. So the first time you mention John Daniel Davidson, we've got to use his full and all three names. And then after that, we can just refer to him as Davidson. Okay, does that make sense? Hot diggity. All right, let's go over what we're doing with this information this week. Okay, in this week's assignment, we have, here we go, two handouts, one of which goes over the jobs up here using quotes and works cited list. Those are the handouts you're going to need for this whole unit. So open them, read them, save them to your desktop, or save them to a file of things that you're going to need to refer to often, or bookmark them, or if you've got a printer, print them out. These are things you're going to need to go back to. And if you don't want to lose which week they were in, save them somewhere else so you can go back to them, okay? Because those handouts are handouts you're going to need over and over again, okay? This is the handout we just went over. So if you couldn't see it real good, you have one where you can open it and see it a lot better on your screen. So Mitzi, don't freak out. It's there for you to open. You have a video going over that handout, and then you have a quiz on it. The quiz will be due Sunday, and I'll put that due date in. And then you have a Q&A on source use. This is one where I really want you to talk about the articles that you're finding in the library, and if there's something confusing about it and you're not sure about how to handle it, like I don't know what periodical this came from, or I'm not sure I'm doing a source introduction right, or I'm not sure my quote integration is right. I want you to take the hardest part for you in all of this and plop it in here and let us help you with it. Okay, so whatever it is that's the hardest about using sources for you, I want you to deal with it and put it in here and get some help. So this is a discussion board where I absolutely expect you to be getting it wrong. And I know that's really weird. So please don't email me and say, I'm not sure I'm getting it right in discussion board. Yeah, I know that. I guarantee you're not getting some of it right, because this is where I want you to put the parts in where you're really pretty sure you're screwing it up. Is it the in-text citation? I don't know where to put it. Is it supposed to look like this? Or is my source introduction right? Whatever it is that you feel most insecure about, I want you to check that in here, give it a try, and get some help with it. So it's going to be wrong. Please don't try to fuss over it being right. It's going to be wrong, because I'm asking you to try the part that's hardest for you, or most confusing, or if you've got an article and you don't understand how to talk about it, I don't know who the author is here, put the link up so we can get to that article, and then we'll help you with that, okay? All right, so that's the discussion board. Initial posts due by Wednesday, responses to peers due by Friday, so you can get some help on it. And then we're doing a source paragraph on Friday. Now, our first source paragraph is not about one of the articles you found from the library yet. That's not yet. First, we're going to do the sources that we all have talked about together. Okay, we've been over who the author is. We've been over what the title is. We're going to do that one first. Okay, so these will make their way into our essay, because this is going to be part of our essay. So it's not wasted time or wasted practice. This is going to be using 3 short quotes, short ones, from either why I changed my mind about Confederate monuments or why we should keep Confederate monuments. It's going to be one of 4 source paragraphs we're going to end up writing, but you're going to choose your one that you're working with here. You've already picked out the quotes you'd like to use, and you've already started on the analysis. So go back and use that work here. Don't start all over. Use that work and bring it forward, and then polish it up. So you're going to be adding your topic sentence. You're going to be adding your source introduction. You're going to be polishing up your quote integration. You're going to be polishing up your analysis a little bit, and then putting them together, and then making sure you have analysis after each quote. So you've already done some of the legwork here. Don't forget that. Okay. Also, if you're struggling with part of it, this can be part of what you put in that discussion board. If you're confident in understanding your sources, you should be trying out the parts of this source paragraph that are confusing you and trying them out in discussion board. Okay? Does this week's work make sense to you? I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to stop the recording. Hold on.